I was standing in my driveway on a freezing January morning in Burlington, Vermont, admiring the massive snowbank. I had just spent 3 hours building along my property line when I heard tires screeching behind me, followed by the sickening crunch of metal meeting compacted snow and ice. My name is Zachary Jenkins, and I had moved into the Maple Ridge Estates community 6 months earlier, thinking it would be a peaceful place to start my remote work as a software developer. The neighborhood seemed nice enough during the summer walkthrough, with its tree-lined streets and well-maintained colonial-style homes. What the real estate agent conveniently forgot to mention was that the HOA president, a woman named Patricia Whitmore, had made it her personal mission to make everyone's life miserable. I spun around to see Patricia's silver Lexus SUV embedded nose first into my carefully constructed snowbank. Steam was rising from the hood, and I could see her through the windshield, her face bright red, already screaming something I couldn't quite hear yet. The snowbank had taken me all morning to build, pushing the snow from my driveway and the street in front of my house into a neat barrier that separated my property from the sidewalk. It was a solid wall of packed snow, maybe 4 feet high and 6 feet wide, positioned entirely on my own property, well away from the road itself. I ran over to check if she was okay, my boots crunching through the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. "Are you hurt?" I called out, approaching the driver's side window. Patricia threw open the door, nearly hitting me in the process. She was a woman in her early 50s, with blonde hair that was clearly maintained at an expensive salon and a wardrobe that screamed country club regular. Her North Face jacket probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "What is wrong with you?" she shrieked, climbing out of the car and gesturing wildly at the snowbank. "Why would you put this here? Look what you did to my car." I took a step back, genuinely confused. "Patricia, are you okay? Did you hit your head? That snowbank is completely on my property. It's nowhere near the street. It's a hazard, a complete hazard. You can't just pile snow up like that. It's against HOA regulations, and now look what happened." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of her car, which had clearly seen better days. The front bumper was crumpled, the hood was dented, and one of the headlights was shattered. I looked at the scene more carefully. There were clear tire tracks in the snow showing that she had turned off the road, crossed the sidewalk, and driven directly into my yard before hitting the snowbank. This wasn't an accident caused by an obstruction. She had literally driven onto my property. "Patricia, you drove into my yard. The snowbank isn't even visible from the street unless you're already off the road. How did this happen?" She ignored my question entirely. "I'm reporting this to the HOA board immediately. You'll be receiving a fine for this dangerous obstruction, and I expect you to pay for my car repairs." "All of them?" I felt my jaw drop. "You want me to pay for repairs because you crashed your car into my property? This snowbank violates Section 4.7 of the HOA bylaws regarding property maintenance and aesthetics. I'll be sending you the bill." She turned on her heel and marched toward her house, which was 3 doors down from mine, leaving her damaged SUV half buried in my snowbank. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then I pulled out my phone and took my own photos. I documented everything: the tire tracks showing her path from the street, across the sidewalk, and into my yard, the snowbank's position entirely on my property, the damage to her vehicle, and the clear space between the snowbank and the actual road. I even took a video, walking from the street, to show how impossible it would be to accidentally hit this snowbank unless you were driving on private property. My neighbor, Tom Rodriguez, came out of his house across the street, coffee mug in hand. "Did Patricia just crash into your yard?" Yeah, and now she's threatening to fine me and make me pay for her repairs. Tom shook his head. That woman is something else. Last month she tried to fine me because my Christmas lights were the wrong shade of white, said they had to be warm white, not cool white. I had to bring in receipts to prove they were the approved color temperature. This is insane. Can she actually fine me for something that's clearly her fault? She'll try. The HOA board is basically just her and two of her friends. They do whatever she wants. My advice: document everything and maybe talk to a lawyer. Tom took a sip of his coffee. Good luck, man. You're going to need it. I went back inside my house, my morning completely ruined. I had planned to spend the day working on a coding project, but now I couldn't focus on anything except the crashed car in my yard. I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my computer and searched for Section 4.7 that Patricia had mentioned. The section was about maintaining property aesthetics, but it was incredibly vague. It mentioned keeping yards neat and orderly and not creating unsightly or hazardous conditions. There was nothing specific about snow removal or where you could pile snow on your own property. It certainly didn't say anything that would make my snowbank a violation. 3 hours later, I heard a tow truck outside. I watched from my window as Patricia directed the driver to remove her Lexus from my property. She was animated, pointing at my house and clearly complaining about something. The tow truck driver just nodded politely, probably used to dealing with difficult customers. That evening, I found a notice stuck to my front door. It was an official HOA violation letter, printed on their letterhead with Patricia's signature at the bottom. Dear Mr. Jenkins, it has come to our attention that you have created a hazardous snow obstruction on your property, located at 147 Maple Ridge Drive. This obstruction poses a danger to vehicles and pedestrians and violates Section 4.7 of the Maple Ridge Estates HOA bylaws regarding property maintenance. You are hereby fined $500 and required to remove the obstruction within 24 hours. Additionally, you are liable for damages caused by this violation, including repairs to a vehicle damaged as a result of your negligence. An itemized bill for repairs will be forthcoming. Failure to comply will result in additional fines and potential legal action. I read the letter 3 times, my anger building with each word. This was absolutely ridiculous. I hadn't done anything wrong. The snowbank was on my property, it wasn't blocking anything, and Patricia had crashed into it by driving into my yard. There was no universe in which I was responsible for this. I immediately called my insurance company to report the incident. The agent I spoke with, a patient woman named Sandra, listened to my story and then asked me to email her all the photos and videos I had taken. This sounds pretty clear-cut, she said after I explained everything. She drove onto your property and crashed into something that was entirely on your land. You're not liable for her damages. Keep all the documentation, and if she or the HOA tries to pursue this, you'll want to consult with an attorney. But from an insurance perspective, you haven't done anything wrong. That was reassuring, at least. I spent the rest of the evening researching Vermont property laws and HOA regulations. What I learned was interesting. While HOAs in Vermont have some power to enforce bylaws, they can't create rules that violate state law or hold homeowners liable for damages that aren't actually their fault. More importantly, I found several cases where HOA fines had been overturned because the bylaws were too vague or weren't being applied fairly. The next morning, I received an email from Patricia with the subject line "Vehicle Repair Bill." My stomach sank as I opened it. The attached estimate was from a luxury car dealership in Burlington. The total cost for repairs was $472, $8,000, for hitting a snowbank at what couldn't have been more than 15 miles per hour. The itemized list was extensive. Front bumper replacement, hood replacement, headlight assemblies, grille replacement, radiator repair, front suspension inspection and adjustment, wheel alignment, and something called comprehensive detailing to remove snow and ice damage. The detailing alone was listed at $600. The email itself was brief and hostile. Mr. Jenkins, attached is the repair estimate for the damage your negligent snow obstruction caused to my vehicle. Payment is expected within 30 days. The HOA board will be meeting next week to discuss further action regarding your violation. You are not invited to attend. I immediately forwarded the email to my insurance agent and then sat down to write a response. I kept it professional but firm. Miss Whitmore, I am not responsible for damage to your vehicle that occurred when you drove onto my private property and struck a snowbank that was entirely within my property boundaries. I have extensive photographic and video evidence showing that the snowbank posed no hazard to anyone operating a vehicle on the public street or sidewalk. I will not be paying this bill. Additionally, I dispute the HOA violation and fine. The snowbank does not violate any specific provision of the bylaws, and I will be attending the board meeting to contest this matter. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The response came 20 minutes later. The HOA board meetings are for board members only. Your presence is not required or desired. If you do not remove the snow obstruction and pay the fine within the specified time frame, additional penalties will be assessed daily. Regarding the vehicle damage, we will be pursuing legal action if payment is not received. I felt my blood pressure rising. This was getting out of hand fast. I decided it was time to consult with an attorney, just as my neighbor Tom had suggested. I found a local law firm that specialized in property disputes and HOA matters and called to make an appointment. The attorney, a sharp woman in her 40s named Rebecca Stone, could see me the next afternoon. I spent the rest of the day gathering every piece of documentation I had: the HOA bylaws, the violation notice, the repair bill, all my photos and videos, my purchase agreement showing the property boundaries, and a timeline of events. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how absurd this situation was. I had done nothing wrong, yet I was facing thousands of dollars in fines and legal threats. And the worst part was that Patricia clearly believed she was in the right. She had somehow convinced herself that I was responsible for her crashing her car into my property. The next morning, I noticed that the snowbank was still there, exactly as I had left it. I had deliberately not removed it because doing so might be seen as an admission of guilt. Besides, we were supposed to get another snowstorm that weekend, and I would just have to build it again. My meeting with Rebecca Stone went better than I expected. Her office was in downtown Burlington, in a historic brick building with a view of Lake Champlain. She reviewed all my documentation carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is pretty straightforward," she said finally. "You're not liable for any of this. The snowbank is on your property. It's not blocking any public right-of-way, and Miss Whitmore caused the accident by driving onto your land. The HOA fine is also problematic. Section 4.7 is too vague to be enforceable for something like this, and even if it weren't, snow removal and storage on your own property is generally protected under property rights. So what do I do?" I asked. "First, we send a letter to the HOA board and to Miss Whitmore personally. I'll draft something that makes it clear you're not paying anything and that any further harassment will be considered grounds for legal action. Second, We request copies of the HOA board meeting minutes for the past year. I want to see if they've enforced this bylaw against anyone else, or if they're targeting you specifically. Third, we prepare for the possibility that they might try to put a lien on your property for unpaid fines, which we would immediately challenge in court. Can they really put a lien on my house for this? They can try, but they won't succeed. The fine isn't legitimate, and no judge is going to uphold it, but we want to be prepared. She leaned back in her chair. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Jenkins. This kind of HOA overreach is more common than you'd think. Some board members get a little bit of power and it goes to their heads. The good news is that when these cases go to court, the homeowner usually wins. What about her car repairs? Is she really going to sue me for that? She might try, but she won't win. You have clear evidence that she caused the accident by driving onto your property. Even if you want to argue that the snowbank was somehow a hazard, which it wasn't, she had no legal reason to be on your property in the first place. It's like if someone broke into your house and tripped over your rug, then tried to sue you for their injuries. It doesn't work that way. I left her office feeling much better. Rebecca said she would have the letter drafted and sent out within 2 days. In the meantime, she advised me to keep documenting everything and to avoid any direct confrontation with Patricia. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. Despite Patricia's email saying I wasn't invited, Rebecca had confirmed that Vermont law requires HOAs to allow homeowners to attend meetings that concern their properties. I had every right to be there. Thursday arrived with another 10 inches of snow. I spent the morning clearing my driveway again, and yes, I added the snow to my snowbank. It was now even bigger than before, a 5-foot-tall monument to my property rights. I took more photos just for my records. That evening, I drove to the community clubhouse where the meeting was being held. It was a small building near the neighborhood entrance, usually used for social events. When I walked in, Patricia was already there with 2 other board members, a thin woman in her 60s named Helen Pritchard, and a balding man around 50 named Douglas Freeman. Patricia's face went red when she saw me. This is a closed meeting. You need to leave. Actually, Vermont law says I have the right to attend any HOA meeting that concerns a violation or fine against my property. I'm here to contest the fine and violation notice you issued. I kept my voice calm and professional, just as Rebecca had coached me. Douglas looked uncomfortable. Patricia, he might be right about that. Maybe we should let him stay. This is my meeting, and I say who attends, Patricia snapped. Actually, it's the HOA's meeting, and the HOA is bound by state law, I said, pulling out a printed copy of the relevant statute that Rebecca had provided. I can read it to you if you'd like. Helen shifted in her seat. Oh, let him stay, Patricia. Let's just get this over with. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue more, but she finally gestured to a chair in the corner. Fine, sit there and don't interrupt. The meeting started with routine business, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for landscaping, reviewing applications for exterior home modifications. I sat quietly, waiting for my issue to come up. Finally, after about 30 minutes, Patricia pulled out a folder with my name on it. Now we need to discuss the ongoing violation at 147 Maple Ridge Drive. Mr. Jenkins has created a dangerous snow obstruction and has refused to remove it despite being issued a fine. He has also refused to take responsibility for the damage his negligence caused to my vehicle. Our vehicle, Douglas corrected quietly. I mean, technically the violation is against the homeowner, not you personally, so we should keep this objective. Patricia shot him a withering look. The point is, he's in violation, he hasn't paid his fine, and he hasn't removed the hazard. I propose we increase the fine to $1,000 and begin proceedings to place a lien on the property." "I'd like to speak," I said, standing up. "You're not allowed to speak during board deliberations. Rebecca had prepared me for this too. Actually, I am allowed to present my case before you vote on any action against me. That's also state law." Helen looked at Patricia. "He's right, Patricia. We have to let him speak. Otherwise, anything we decide could be challenged." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. "Fine. 2 minutes." I walked to the front of the room and pulled out my phone, connecting it to the TV screen that was mounted on the wall. "I've prepared a presentation of the evidence." I showed them the photos and videos I had taken, narrating as I went. "As you can see, the snowbank is entirely on my property, approximately 8 feet from the sidewalk and 15 feet from the street. It poses no obstruction to vehicles or pedestrians. Here are the tire tracks from Miss Whitmore's vehicle, clearly showing that she drove off the road, across the sidewalk, and onto my property before striking the snowbank. This wasn't an accident caused by a hazard. This was a collision caused by someone driving where they shouldn't have been driving." I pulled up the HOA bylaws next. Section 4.7 mentions keeping properties neat and orderly, but it doesn't specify anything about snow removal or where snow can be placed on private property. The snowbank is neat. It's intentionally constructed and maintained. It's not hazardous because it's nowhere near public areas, and I've checked with 3 other homeowners in this community who also pile snow on their properties after storms. I have photos of their properties too. I showed pictures of several other yards with snow piles, some even larger than mine. I want to know why I'm being fined when these other homeowners aren't. Is this bylaw being enforced fairly, or am I being targeted? The room was silent. Douglas and Helen were both staring at the TV screen. Patricia's face had gone from red to almost purple. "That's completely different," Patricia sputtered. "Those are in backyards. Yours is in the front yard where everyone can see it. The bylaw doesn't distinguish between front and backyards, and again, it's not blocking anything or creating any hazard. The only damage it caused was to your vehicle when you drove onto my property." I disconnected my phone and sat back down. "I'm not paying the fine, and I'm not paying for your car repairs. I've consulted with an attorney, and she agrees that this violation is not legitimate. If you proceed with a lien or any other legal action, I'll be forced to countersue for harassment." Patricia stood up abruptly. "This is outrageous. Douglas, Helen, we need to vote on this. All in favor of increasing the fine and moving forward with a lien." Patricia raised her hand. Douglas and Helen looked at each other uncomfortably but didn't move. "Douglas." "Helen." Patricia's voice was sharp. "I don't know, Patricia," Helen said slowly. "He makes some good points. Maybe we should table this and get our own legal opinion." "Our legal opinion? I'm the HOA president." "My opinion is what matters." "That's not really how it works," Douglas said quietly. "We're supposed to make decisions as a board, and if there's legal ambiguity, we should probably consult an attorney before we do something that could get the HOA sued." "Fine." Patricia slammed her folder shut. "Meeting adjourned. We'll revisit this later." She stormed out of the room, leaving Helen and Douglas sitting at the table looking embarrassed. I approached them cautiously. "I don't want to cause trouble. I just want to be treated fairly." Helen nodded. "I understand, dear. Patricia can be intense. She takes her role very seriously." "Maybe too seriously," Douglas muttered. Then, louder, "Look, I'll talk to her. We should probably get the HOA attorney to review this before we go any further." I thanked them and left the clubhouse. As I drove home, I felt like I had won a small victory. At least the other board members weren't completely under Patricia's spell. The next morning, I received a letter from Rebecca Stone addressed to Patricia Whitmore and the HOA board. She had copied me on it. The letter was everything I had hoped for: professional, firm, and thoroughly documented. It laid out all the reasons why the fine was illegitimate, why I wasn't liable for the car damage, and why any further action would constitute harassment. She requested all meeting minutes for the past year and warned that any lien attempt would be immediately challenged in court. The letter concluded with a paragraph that made me smile. Please be advised that if the HOA continues to pursue this matter, Mr. Jenkins will have grounds to sue for malicious prosecution, harassment, and abuse of authority. He may also seek damages for his time, legal fees, and emotional distress. We strongly encourage the HOA to dismiss this matter immediately. I didn't hear anything from the HOA for a week. The snowbank remained in my yard, growing slightly smaller as the weather warmed up during the day and then refroze at night. I went about my normal routine, working from home and trying not to think about the ongoing drama. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I usually don't answer those, but something made me pick up. "Is this Zachary Jenkins?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Officer Marcus Chen with the Burlington Police Department. I'm calling about an incident report filed by Patricia Whitmore. She claims you've been harassing her and refusing to pay for damages you caused to her vehicle." My heart sank. "Officer, that's not what happened at all. She crashed into my property and is now trying to make me pay for it." "I'd like to hear your side of the story." "Can you come down to the station this afternoon?" I called Rebecca immediately. She told me not to worry but said she would meet me at the police station. "This is actually good," she said. "It means Patricia is desperate. Filing a false police report is a bad move on her part." 2 hours later, I was sitting in an interview room at the Burlington Police Department with Rebecca beside me. Officer Chen was a serious-looking man in his 30s who listened patiently as I explained the entire situation. I showed him all my photos and videos on my phone, the HOA violation notice, the repair bill, and Rebecca's letter. He took notes throughout, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat back and sighed. "Mr. Jenkins, from what I can see, you haven't done anything wrong. Miss Whitmore drove onto your property and crashed into something that was entirely on your land. That's not your fault, and you're certainly not obligated to pay for her repairs." "So why did she file a report?" I asked. "She claimed you were harassing her and creating dangerous conditions in the neighborhood. She said you've been threatening her and that the HOA is afraid to take action because you've been intimidating the board members." He looked at me carefully. "Have you had any contact with Miss Whitmore since the incident besides the HOA meeting?" "None. I've only communicated through email and only in response to letters and bills she sent me. Everything has been documented." Rebecca pulled out a folder. "Officer, I have copies of all correspondence between my client and Miss Whitmore. As you'll see, Mr. Jenkins has been nothing but professional. If anything, Miss Whitmore has been the one engaging in harassment by making false accusations and threatening illegal liens." Officer Chen reviewed the documents. "I'm going to close this report as unfounded. Miss Whitmore, there's no evidence of harassment or dangerous behavior on your part, Mr. Jenkins. However," he looked more serious, "I do need to document that Miss Whitmore has filed what appears to be a false report. That's actually a crime in Vermont." "What happens now?" I asked. "I'll note in my report that the allegations were unfounded and that the evidence suggests Miss Whitmore caused the accident through her own negligence. If she continues to file false reports or escalates this situation, she could face charges." I'd recommend you both work this out through civil means and leave law enforcement out of it unless there's a genuine safety concern." We thanked him and left the station. Rebecca looked pleased. "This actually helps your case significantly. You now have a police report on record stating that her claims are unfounded. If this ends up in court, that's going to be very valuable." "Do you think it will end up in court?" I asked. "Honestly, I think Patricia is going to realize she's in over her head and back off. But we'll see." I was wrong. Patricia didn't back off. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Montpelier. Patricia had hired an attorney and was officially suing me for the cost of her car repairs, plus additional damages for emotional distress and loss of use of vehicle. The total amount she was seeking was $15,000. I immediately forwarded everything to Rebecca. She called me back within an hour, and she actually sounded amused. "This is the dumbest lawsuit I've seen in years," she said. Her attorney is either incompetent or didn't bother to review the evidence before filing. We're going to respond with a motion to dismiss, and I'm also going to countersue for your legal fees and damages for harassment. "Is this really worth all this trouble?" I asked, feeling exhausted. "Mr. Jenkins, Zachary, here's the thing. If you back down now, Patricia wins. She'll know she can bully you into doing whatever she wants, and she'll do the same thing to other homeowners in your neighborhood. People like this don't stop unless someone stands up to them. We have all the evidence on our side. Let's see this through." She was right. I agreed to move forward with the countersuit. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork. Rebecca filed our response to Patricia's lawsuit, including the motion to dismiss. She also filed a countersuit alleging harassment, abuse of HOA authority, and filing a frivolous lawsuit. We asked for $20,000 in damages, plus legal fees. The court date was set for early March. In the meantime, life in the neighborhood had become uncomfortable. Patricia had apparently been telling anyone who would listen that I was a dangerous troublemaker who refused to take responsibility for my actions. Some of my neighbors started avoiding me. Others, like Tom Rodriguez, made a point of stopping by to express their support. "Everyone knows Patricia is crazy," Tom told me one evening when he came over with a 6-pack of beer. "Most of us are just too scared to stand up to her. The last guy who challenged her on something ended up moving away because she made his life so miserable." "What happened?" "He painted his front door red. Apparently, that wasn't one of the approved colors. Patricia started fining him, then she'd drive by his house and take pictures constantly. She'd send him violation notices for the tiniest things. His grass was a 1/4 inch too long. His garbage cans were visible from the street 10 minutes past the pickup time. His mailbox was slightly crooked. He finally just sold the house and left." "That's insane." "Yeah, but that's Patricia. She's been HOA president for 8 years now. Nobody wants to run against her because they know she'll make their lives hell." Tom took a sip of his beer. "I'm glad you're fighting back. Win or lose, at least someone is standing up to her." February turned into March, and the snow finally started melting. My snowbank, the source of all this trouble, gradually shrank until it was just a small pile of dirty ice. I left it there on principle. The court date arrived on a gray Monday morning. Rebecca met me outside the Chittenden County Courthouse in Burlington. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." We went through security and found our courtroom. Patricia was already there with her attorney, a nervous-looking young man in an ill-fitting suit who couldn't have been more than a few years out of law school. Patricia herself was dressed like she was going to a country club luncheon, in a cream-colored suit with pearl earrings. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Margaret Foster, called the court to order. Patricia's attorney went first, laying out her case. He claimed that I had created a hazardous condition, that Patricia had been injured in the accident, which was news to me since she'd never mentioned any injury before, and that I had then harassed and intimidated her when she tried to hold me accountable. Rebecca's response was devastating. She presented all our evidence, the photos, the videos, the timeline of events, the police report stating that the allegations were unfounded, the documentation of Patricia's threats and false claims. She pointed out that Patricia had never mentioned any injury until now, months after the incident, and that claiming injury after the fact suggested fraud. Your Honor, Rebecca concluded, this case is a clear example of someone abusing the legal system to bully a homeowner who did nothing wrong. Miss Whitmore drove onto my client's property and crashed her vehicle into an object that was entirely within his property boundaries. She then attempted to use her position as HOA president to extract payment through illegitimate fines and threats. When that didn't work, she filed a false police report, and now she's filed this frivolous lawsuit. My client has been put through months of stress and has incurred significant legal fees defending himself against baseless accusations. We ask that the court dismiss her claims and grant our countersuit. Judge Foster looked at Patricia's attorney. Counselor, do you have any evidence that the Snowbank was on or near public property? Any evidence that it created a genuine hazard? The young attorney shuffled through his papers. Well, Your Honor, Miss Whitmore has stated that the Snowbank was obstructing the view of the street and that I'm not asking what Miss Whitmore stated. I'm asking if you have any evidence, photos, witness testimony, expert analysis, anything. The Snowbank was visible from the street, which Miss Whitmore felt was unsightly, and so you have no evidence that it was actually hazardous or obstructive. No, Your Honor, but the HOA bylaws state. I'm not here to enforce HOA bylaws. I'm here to determine if there's a legitimate legal claim. From what I can see, your client drove onto the defendant's property and caused her own accident. Do you have any evidence to contradict that? The attorney was sweating now. Miss Whitmore maintains that she was forced to swerve to avoid the obstruction, and the tire tracks in the evidence photos show a deliberate turn onto the property, not a swerve. There's no evidence of any other vehicle or obstacle that would have necessitated such a maneuver. Judge Foster looked down at the papers in front of her. I'm dismissing the plaintiff's case with prejudice. The claim is without merit and borders on frivolous. Patricia stood up. Your Honor, this is outrageous. He damaged my car and then threatened me and Miss Whitmore. Sit down. You've had your day in court and your case has been dismissed. If you'd like to speak, you can do so through your attorney. Patricia sat down, her face bright red. Judge Foster turned to Rebecca. Now, regarding the countersuit, Miss Stone, you're seeking damages for harassment and abuse of authority. Yes, Your Honor. My client has been subjected to months of false accusations, threats, and legal harassment. He's incurred over $5,000 in legal fees defending himself against baseless claims. He's also suffered significant emotional distress, been ostracized in his community, and had to take time away from his work to deal with this matter. The judge looked at Patricia and her attorney. Does the plaintiff wish to respond to the countersuit? The young attorney stood up slowly. Your Honor, Miss Whitmore was acting in her capacity as HOA president and believed she was enforcing the community bylaws. She didn't intend to cause any harassment or distress. Intent isn't really the issue here. The issue is whether her actions were reasonable and justified. Based on the evidence presented, they clearly were not. She crashed her vehicle on someone else's property and then tried to make them pay for it. When that didn't work, She abused her authority as HOA president, filed a false police report, and then filed a frivolous lawsuit. Judge Foster made some notes. I'm granting the countersuit. Miss Whitmore is ordered to pay Mr. Jenkins $20,000 in damages, plus his documented legal fees. Additionally, I'm ordering that Miss Whitmore remove any fines or violations from Mr. Jenkins's HOA record related to this incident. Patricia made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. The judge wasn't done. Furthermore, I'm concerned about Miss Whitmore's conduct as HOA president. The evidence suggests she's been abusing her authority and targeting homeowners who displease her. While this court doesn't have direct jurisdiction over HOA matters, I'm ordering that the HOA board undergo mandatory training on Vermont property law and HOA governance. I'm also recommending that the HOA bylaws be reviewed by a qualified attorney to ensure they're clear, fair, and enforceable. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. I had won. Not only that, but Patricia had to pay me $20,000 plus legal fees, which Rebecca estimated would bring the total to around $26,000. Rebecca was grinning. That went even better than I expected. Judge Foster does not like people who abuse the legal system. Patricia stormed out of the courtroom without looking at us, her attorney trailing behind her looking shell-shocked. As we left the courthouse, Rebecca pulled me aside. A word of advice. You won the legal battle, but you still have to live in that neighborhood. Patricia is going to be humiliated and angry. Watch out for retaliation. What kind of retaliation? Hard to say. Some people accept defeat gracefully, others double down. Just keep documenting everything and call me if anything else happens. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The stress of the past few months had been crushing, but now it was finally over. I had stood up to a bully and won. When I pulled into my neighborhood, I noticed several neighbors outside. Word had apparently spread fast. Tom Rodriguez jogged across the street as I got out of my car. Dude, I heard you won. Is it true Patricia has to pay you 20 grand? 26,000 including legal fees. Tom let out a low whistle. That's amazing. Everyone's talking about it. Helen called an emergency HOA meeting tonight. I think they're going to vote Patricia out as president. Really? Yeah, man. This whole thing has been embarrassing for the HOA. Helen and Douglas are worried about liability. If Patricia screwed up this badly with you, what other lawsuits might be coming? They want to cut ties before anything else happens. That evening, I attended the emergency HOA meeting. The small clubhouse was packed with homeowners, way more than usually showed up. Patricia was sitting at the board table, her arms crossed, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Helen called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on short notice. As many of you have heard, there was a court ruling today regarding the situation between our board president, Patricia Whitmore, and homeowner Zachary Jenkins. The judge ruled in Mr. Jenkins's favor and found that Miss Whitmore had acted inappropriately in her role as HOA president. Someone in the back called out, "She needs to resign." Several other voices echoed the sentiment. Helen held up her hand. "Please, let me continue. The board has discussed this matter, and Douglas and I believe it's in the best interest of the community for Patricia to step down as president. Patricia, we'd like to give you the opportunity to resign voluntarily." Patricia's face was like stone. "No, I was elected president and I'm not resigning. I did what I thought was right for this community." "You cost the HOA money and reputation," Douglas said. The judge ordered mandatory training and bylaw review. That's going to cost thousands of dollars, and you have to pay Jenkins $26,000 out of your own pocket. How does any of that help the community? I'm not resigning, Patricia repeated. Helen looked around the room. Then we'll need to have a vote. According to our bylaws, the board can be removed by a majority vote of all homeowners in the community. Is there a motion to remove Patricia Whitmore as HOA president? 3 hands shot up simultaneously. Motion made and seconded. All in favor. The room erupted with ayes. I didn't even see anyone vote against it. The motion passes. Patricia, you're removed as HOA president effective immediately. Please return all HOA documents, keys, and materials to Douglas by the end of the week. Patricia stood up, shaking with rage. You're all going to regret this. This neighborhood is going to fall apart without me, you'll see. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Soon the whole room was applauding. Helen looked embarrassed but relieved. Thank you. Now we need to elect a new president. Are there any nominations? To my surprise, Tom Rodriguez raised his hand. I nominate Zachary Jenkins. Several people voiced their agreement. I felt my eyes go wide. Wait, I don't know if I'm the right person for this. You stood up to Patricia when nobody else would, someone called out. That takes guts. And you actually know the law, someone else added. We need someone who's not going to get us sued. Helen looked at me hopefully. Would you be willing to serve, Mr. Jenkins? Even temporarily until we can hold a proper election? I thought about it. The idea of dealing with HOA politics made me want to run away. But then I thought about what Tom had said about the previous homeowner who'd been driven out by Patricia's harassment. And I thought about how much easier my life would have been if someone had stood up to her before I moved in. Okay, I said finally. I'll do it, but I want to make some changes. Starting with clearer bylaws and fairer enforcement. The vote was unanimous. I was now the HOA president of Maple Ridge Estates. Over the next few weeks, I worked with Helen and Douglas to reform the HOA. We hired an attorney to review and rewrite the bylaws, making them specific and enforceable rather than vague and subjective. We established clear procedures for violations and appeals. We created term limits for board positions so no one could dominate the HOA for years like Patricia had done. We also sent letters to every homeowner Patricia had fined in the past year, inviting them to appeal if they felt the fine was unjust. 6 families came forward with complaints about unfair treatment. We reviewed each case and ended up dismissing 4 of the fines and reducing 2 others. Patricia paid me the $26,000 in installments over 3 months. She never spoke to me again, barely even acknowledging my existence when we passed on the street. She eventually put her house on the market and moved away in June. I heard she moved to a condo complex with no HOA. The Snowbank, such as it was, finally melted completely in April. I never built another one, though I made sure the bylaws explicitly stated that homeowners could pile snow anywhere on their own property as long as it didn't block public right-of-way. My first year as HOA president was a learning experience. I discovered that most homeowners just wanted to be left alone to enjoy their homes without constant scrutiny and petty enforcement. We shifted the focus of the HOA from policing minor aesthetic issues to maintaining common areas and organizing community events. Tom Rodriguez became vice president, and together, we organized a summer block party that had the best turnout in years. People actually seemed happy to be part of the community again. I also became friendly with Helen and Douglas, who both apologized for not standing up to Patricia sooner. We were scared, Helen admitted. She was so aggressive, and it was easier to just go along with her. I'm ashamed it took someone like you, who wasn't intimidated by her, to finally stop her. One evening in late July, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying a beer when Tom came over to join me. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. "You know," Tom said, "this place is actually nice now. People smile when they see each other. Nobody's worried about getting fined for stupid stuff. It's like the whole neighborhood can breathe again. It's amazing what happens when you stop treating homeowners like criminals," I replied. "Think you'll run for president again when your term is up?" I thought about it. "Maybe. Or maybe we'll find someone else who wants to do it. The important thing is that we've changed the culture. This isn't Patricia's fiefdom anymore. It's a community." My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the lawyer Rebecca Stone. "Just wanted to check in and see how things are going. I hope you're enjoying your victory and your new role as HOA president. You handled yourself with integrity throughout this whole ordeal, and you should be proud. Let me know if you ever need anything." I replied with a thank you and a brief update on how we'd reformed the HOA. Then I set my phone down and went back to enjoying the evening. Looking back, I never expected that a snowbank would change my life so dramatically. But in a weird way, I was grateful for the whole experience. It taught me that standing up to bullies is worth the effort, even when it's hard and expensive and stressful. It taught me that most people want to do the right thing but sometimes need someone to lead the way. And it taught me that home ownership isn't just about maintaining your property, it's about being part of a community and making that community better. The snowbank was long gone, melted away as if it had never existed, but its impact remained. Maple Ridge Estates was a better place because I had refused to back down, and every time it snowed, I smiled a little, remembering the absurdity of how this all started. I never did build another snowbank in my front yard, though I could have. Instead, I just piled the snow in a neat row along the edge of my driveway like most people did. But I kept that first picture I had taken of my original snowbank as a reminder. It hung in my home office, a monument to the principle that standing up for yourself matters. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The legal fees I had incurred were more than covered by the settlement from Patricia, and I even had money left over. I used some of it to improve my home's landscaping and donated the rest to a local legal aid organization that helped homeowners dealing with HOA disputes. The mandatory training that Judge Foster had ordered turned out to be incredibly valuable. Helen, Douglas, and I attended a full-day seminar on Vermont HOA law and best practices. We learned about the proper procedures for enforcing bylaws, the limits of HOA authority, and how to balance community standards with individual property rights. We came back energized and armed with knowledge that helped us run the HOA much more effectively. One of the most satisfying moments came in September, when a new family moved into Patricia's old house. They were a young couple with a toddler, and they were nervous about the HOA after hearing stories from neighbors about how strict it used to be. I met with them personally to explain the changes we had made, and to assure them that our goal was to support homeowners, not harass them. "That's such a relief," the wife, whose name was Jennifer, said. "We almost didn't buy the house because we heard the HOA was terrible." "It was," I admitted, "but it's better now. We're all just trying to live our lives and maintain a nice neighborhood. If you have any questions or concerns, my door is always open." They seemed genuinely grateful, and I felt proud of what we had accomplished. In October, the HOA held our annual meeting to elect officers for the next year. To my surprise, several people asked me to continue as president. I agreed to serve one more term, but I made it clear that after that, someone else would need to step up. Tom agreed to stay on as vice president, and we recruited 2 new board members to replace Helen and Douglas, who wanted to step down after years of service. The meeting was nothing like the contentious emergency meeting where Patricia had been removed. People were relaxed, even cheerful. We discussed upcoming projects like repairing the clubhouse roof and updating the playground equipment. We voted to reduce HOA dues slightly because we had been running under budget without all the legal expenses Patricia's reign had generated. Everyone left the meeting feeling positive about the community. As November approached and the weather turned cold again, I found myself thinking about that morning almost a year earlier when this whole saga had begun. I had been so angry and frustrated, dealing with someone who refused to accept basic facts and responsibility. But in the end, standing up to Patricia had not only resolved my immediate problem, it had transformed an entire community. The first snowfall of the new season came on a Sunday morning. I went outside to shovel my driveway, and several neighbors were doing the same. We waved to each other and exchanged pleasantries about the weather. Tom called over from across the street, joking about whether I was going to build another snowbank. "Not a chance," I called back, laughing. "Once was enough." As I finished shoveling, I stood for a moment in my driveway, looking at the spot where the infamous snowbank had been. The grass was still there, green and healthy underneath the fresh layer of snow. There was no evidence of the drama that had unfolded there, no sign of the crashed Lexus or the heated arguments or the legal battles. But I knew the truth. That spot, that simple pile of snow, had been the catalyst for positive change. It had exposed a tyrant, empowered a community, and taught me that fighting for what's right is always worth it, even when the stakes seem small. I went inside and made myself some coffee, settling into my home office to start my workday. Through the window, I could see the neighborhood going about its business. Kids were already out building snowmen. Someone was stringing up Christmas lights. Everything was normal and peaceful. My phone rang. It was Rebecca Stone. "Hey, Zachary. I hope I'm not bothering you on a Sunday, but I wanted to let you know that the Vermont Bar Association is doing a presentation on HOA law next month, and I'm using your case as an example of how to handle HOA overreach. I wanted to make sure you're okay with that. Of course. If it helps other people dealing with situations like mine, absolutely use it." Great. You know, in all my years practicing law, I've rarely seen someone handle a situation with as much patience and integrity as you did. You could have gotten angry, escalated things, made it personal. But you stayed focused on the facts and the law. That's why you won. I had a good lawyer. You were a good client. Anyway, I won't keep you. I just wanted to check in and say thank you. Your case reminded me why I love what I do. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair, feeling a sense of accomplishment. The ordeal had been stressful and expensive, but it had been worth it. I had protected my rights, helped my community, and apparently would now help others facing similar situations. The months that followed were blissfully uneventful. The HOA ran smoothly, neighborhood relations were positive, and I was able to focus on my work and my life without the constant stress of legal battles and conflict. Occasionally, I would get an email from someone in another HOA community asking for advice based on my experience, and I was always happy to share what I had learned. As my second term as HOA president came to an end the following year, we held elections for new officers. A retired school teacher named Richard Morrison ran for president, campaigning on a platform of continuing the reforms we had implemented. He won easily, and I gladly handed over the responsibilities. At my last meeting as president, the board surprised me with a plaque that read, "Zachary Jenkins, HOA President 2025-2027. with gratitude for his courage, integrity, and dedication to making Maple Ridge Estates a true community. I was genuinely touched. "Thank you all," I said, my voice a little thick with emotion. "When I moved here, I just wanted a quiet place to live and work. I never expected to end up leading an HOA revolution, but I'm grateful for the experience and for all of you. This community is special because of the people in it, not because of rules and fines. Let's keep it that way." Everyone applauded, and we moved on to regular business. But as I sat there for my last meeting as president, I reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. A community that had been living in fear of its own HOA board was now thriving. Neighbors who had been strangers were now friends. And I had learned that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we don't choose but face anyway. The legacy of the Snowbank incident lived on in the revised HOA bylaws, in the improved community culture, and in the lessons learned by everyone involved. It had started as an absurd situation, a woman crashing into a pile of snow and then trying to blame the property owner, but it had become something more meaningful. It had become a story about standing up for what's right, about not letting bullies win, and about the power of one person to make a difference. I still live in Maple Ridge Estates. I still shovel my driveway when it snows, and I still pile the snow on my property. But I do it with a smile now, knowing that I helped ensure every homeowner has the right to do the same without fear of unjust retaliation. Patricia never did return to the neighborhood after she moved away. I heard through the grapevine that she had joined another HOA board in her new community, but apparently she had learned her lesson and was much more reasonable in her approach. I hoped that was true. Maybe our conflict had taught her something too. As for me, I continued working from home, enjoying my house and my neighborhood. The community remained healthy and harmonious under Richard Morrison's leadership. Tom Rodriguez and I became close friends, often getting together for beers and barbecues. Life was good. Every winter, when the first snow falls, I think about that January morning when Patricia crashed into my property. I think about how one moment of absurdity spiraled into months of conflict and ultimately led to positive change. And I'm reminded that you never know which small stand you take will end up mattering. The story of the Snowbank became something of a legend in Burlington's legal community. Rebecca Stone told me that other attorneys referenced it when advising clients on HOA disputes. The case became shorthand for HOA overreach and the importance of documented evidence. In a small way, my experience had helped establish precedent that would protect other homeowners. But more than the legal impact, I was proud of the human impact. Maple Ridge Estates was a better place to live. People felt safe and respected in their own homes. The HOA existed to serve the community, not to control it. That was the real victory. Years from now, when I eventually sell my house and move on to whatever comes next, I'll look back on my time in this neighborhood with satisfaction. I'll remember the challenge, the stress, and the ultimate triumph. I'll remember the snowbank that started it all. And I'll smile, knowing that I didn't just protect myself, I helped protect everyone who came after me. The snowbank melted long ago, disappearing like it was never there. But its impact remains, frozen in time through the changes it sparked, the lessons it taught, and the community it helped save from tyranny. Sometimes the smallest things have the biggest consequences. Sometimes a pile of snow can change everything. And that, in the end, is the story of how an HOA Karen crashed into my snowbank and tried to bill me for her entire car repair, and how standing up to her transformed not just my life, but an entire community. It's a story about justice, perseverance, and the importance of never backing down when you know you're right. It's a story that I'll carry with me forever, a reminder that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they refuse to be bullied. The sun sets on Maple Ridge Estates, casting long shadows across the snow-covered lawns. Smoke rises from chimneys, lights glow in windows, and the neighborhood settles in for another peaceful evening. Somewhere in one of those houses, I'm sitting by the fire, content in the knowledge that I played a part in making this place what it is. And if another tyrant ever tries to take control, this community now knows how to stand up and fight back. That's my legacy, born from a snowbank and forged in the fires of legal battle. And I wouldn't change a thing.